Alright, guys, come on. For once in a blue moon, we will be doing a debate today. Like I said, once in a blue moon, we will be hosting a debate. It will be Debater versus Lucario. Guys, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you send this live out to Lucario and to Debater. We will be watching Debater versus Lucario. They had some contentions upon the pro-life, pro-choice debate that of which they were holding about, 5 minutes ago or so. We got both of them here.
Yeah, I'm surprised I'm surprised he remembered to follow you. I feel like he just didn't. Yeah. Anyway, what's your position, man? Or do you want me to defend my view? That's not the reason. It would be a reason. It's just an example of a reason. I don't find it to have any much explanatory power or even parsimony in like my general abortion position. Also, wait. You need to mute. Sorry. I'm sorry. You need to mute and unmute so people can hear you.
Yeah, so people can hear you. Explain the primary reasons then.
So the primary reason,
if it's not one, I don't mind you jibber-jabbering.
Abortion. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
If it's not one reason, I don't mind the jibber-jabbering. Obviously, like, we could do it like an...
Yeah, the main reason I think abortion is wrong, or I value the abortion position of pro-life, is because of causal obligation. I do think that is true. The reason I don't have an essay exception is because there are a number of other reasons why I think you shouldn't abort a child. One being, I think it is a disproportional means of conflict resolution to abort a fetus, simply because he's violating your property or bodily autonomy. And then the second reason would be, or I guess the third reason for this specific case in general abortion, but the second reason just for the cases of SA would be because of parental obligation. Yeah, that's it.
So, causal, I can agree with the premises of causal, but applying them in society is difficult when there are many nuanced sort of situations that occur. So, for instance, as a great example, when we try and determine what risk to life is, often this is based on the individual capacity basis, other health conditions, mental health. So there are many reasons why I'd say that causal fails necessarily when it comes to the health position, because there'd still be a large proportion of abortions that would be determined by the consequences of somebody's health. When we talk about parental obligation, I'm still confused as to what you're referring to, because are we talking about parental obligation not to abandon a child? Because parental obligation not to abandon a child, well, we know that people who have been SA'd are actually the highest statistic in abandoning the child. So in real world terms, they would be abandoning parental obligation by the basis of having the child at a disproportionate rate. So I'm not sure what your parental obligation is. Quite an obscure sort of way of saying it, if you want to clarify.
Well, I think kind of the last part seemed kind of like a non sequitur, but I did have some other questions before that, because you said that you agree with the premises of causal obligation. Can you like lay out the premises that you agree with and or disagree with?
Well, when I've heard causal being debated, I've mostly heard it from Tyler, and he says the dependency of one life on the other, and he uses an example of if it's one person's in a car crash and somebody else gets injured, relates it to whether you yourself have a responsibility to that individual, or have a responsibility to the injuries of the individual, and then he relates it back out towards extrapolate it back out towards abortion, that just because you have a child in you doesn't mean that it's just because it's dependent on you doesn't mean that you have a right to erase its existence effectively. I'm trying to be summary, but that's what I interpret from what I've heard and what I've seen people use it as.
Oh yeah, well I guess I do have a question. Wait, Scooby, can you drop like other people? This is like a one-on-one conversation. It's a question. You're the host. It's up to you. But yeah, I disagree. I tend to disagree with Tyler on like a couple of things. I think we have the same conclusions and generally a lot of the same positions, but I just have different ways of getting there. So I guess the argument that I would use for causal, if you want, or you can interpret them as premises, but I haven't syllogized it. I can probably give you the inference rules later. But essentially, is that you can after you cause like the child to exist in a state of dependency, and I can give an argument as to why pregnancy is a state of dependency. I don't know if you want to contend that's premise later, but
No,
after you
it's a
cause a
state of
child to exist in
dependency.
a
I
state of
don't. I,
dependency, I'd say that after the state of dependency, the child is going to receive harm, and I think you can either, it's a disjunction, so you could either save it from the harm or you could let it go through the harm. And then when I say obligation, because it's almost like a definition game to be honest, I just define obligation as something, some motivating reasons to realize a moral state of affairs. And so you can look at the disjunction of worlds or possible worlds and say, okay, one member of the disjunction involves like terminating a child because of your actions. I think that member is bad. And so I just like use a disjunctive syllogism and say, okay, look at the other member of the disjunction or the possible world and say, okay, this one has to be moral. Therefore, you have an obligation to realize this member of the disjunction of worlds.
it's a very simplistic overview. I will give you that, and I mean in the way you lay it out, not in necessarily how you could use it. You could extrapolate it out further, and look at individual circumstances that it could be applicable to, and where maybe there's contentions with the moral grounds based on, especially exceptions that you could possibly give in regards to health wise, which is why I think causal does allow health in most instances. Um, it, I would still like to hear what you're referring to as parental obligation, because my main contention is not with your causal. You can argue from causal as much as you like. I'm just finding it difficult to sort of justify a situation in which a 11-year-old has been forced to be made pregnant. Maybe potentially there's no risk to them dying or the child dying, and yet you'd still say that they should have that child, and they shouldn't be allowed to have an abortion. And
Oh, my argument
on a
for the
moral
child
ground.
is, oh, sorry. I guess I can elaborate. I guess I think I did do a poor job of explaining this earlier. I don't think parental obligation is going to be applicable towards like 11-year-old children. I don't know when like I'd say you're rational enough. I'd probably just like take the default view and just say when you're 18, you're rational enough to like make decisions as far as like property and like complexities like this. But the reason I wouldn't have an exception for children is because like it seems like a disproportional means of conflict resolution. But that didn't answer your question. I'm sorry. So did you want to get into like why I
Why do you
believe in
think they're
parental obligation?
disproportionate means for conflict resolution? That's
Disproportional
what I.
means of conflict. Oh, I
Yeah.
believe in proportionality as like a means of conflict resolution. It's usually like there's two competing main theories of conflict resolution on gentlest means and also proportional force. I look at like the entailments of gentlest means or gentlest means necessary, by the way, and it seems like it has some like really weird reductives that I wouldn't find intuitive. And then I look at counterexample of like proportional force, and I tend to lean towards proportional force. And so when I look at conflict, I think the conflict resolution should be done in a manner of like some proportionality to it.
Now, and what would be the proportionality of an individual who has been basically forced into a sexual act, and because of the consequence of that sexual act, and obviously the trauma of the experience of it, they're now forced to bear a child?
Oh, sorry, repeat that. Sorry, I was reading the comments.
Okay, I'll restate. What would there be the proportionality for the action to be a reaction to the forced sort of impregnation of an individual? What would be a proportional way for that individual to deal with it based on your framework?
I guess the metric I would use is just I would evaluate like understood values, and so I would define out values as something that an entity acts to gain or keep, and so from that you can get like a kind of a hierarchy of values. So an example would be I value my guitar. I really like it. I like my guitar more than my shoe, but I also don't value my guitar as much as my life. So to sacrifice my guitar as opposed to my shoe, that would be like less desirable. That would be like disproportional, or at least I'm just explaining some sort of metric that you can use to evaluate values. And so, in the case of abortion, and when we're talking about conflict resolution, you can look at the sacrifice of values, especially with non-volitional agents. And so, you could say, okay, this agent is non-volitionally sacrificing some of your values. Would it be proportional, or would it be justified for you to like sacrifice now even more values to that person who's not volitionally taking away from your values, but instead like an innocent it's not, I don't want to say bystander, that would be like a category error, but an innocent actor in the situation. And I don't think innocent actors are subject towards like being sacrificed with their values, especially such that are greater than yours, because you're not maximizing utility, you're just like taking away from utility here for no reason, for no apparent reason, in my opinion.
Well, there is an apparent reason. And many would say the ability for the individual to actually successfully be able to raise a child. And then the increased risk of potential consequences due to detriments to mental health, because mental health does play a significant role in the birthing process. A significantly poor mental health increases the risks of the unalivement of both the child and the I once again I will refrain from saying mother. I will say the child and the person who's been impregnated. And the only reason I'm using this is because I don't want to equate motherhood to potentially somebody who's been the victim of SA. And that's the only reason I'm not choosing to use that, because that may be sort of disconcerting for those individuals who may be listening. I wouldn't necessarily conflate the two. And in the situation of the reality, we can't just think as the child in the womb and then outside the womb, not give consideration for the after effects or the consequences of those actions. I'd say it would be more disproportional to allow somebody who's I would say more conscious in the sense that they can actually sort of understand complexities, grow up in an environment where that's sort of in play. I would actually think that abortion would be a kinder sort of reality for those individuals, because mostly they would end up in circumstances that would be disproportionate and actually would lead to them having themselves a higher statistic towards unalivement.
Wait, disproportionate towards what? I'm forgetting or it seems like we're kind of.
Disproportionate or not conducive towards what many people would consider to be a healthy life.
Wait, this
So
is just a conflation. This is just a misunderstanding of proportionality. Because when you're talking about proportionality, you're going to evaluate two concepts and see if they're like proportionate to each other. And so, if you want to change you want to change one of the members of the set that we're evaluating, like we're like putting it on like a proportionality scale. If you're just going to change like one of the members, then yeah, obviously you can categorize something as disproportionate, obviously. But that's not what I'm doing when I refer to like
no,
proportional
no,
force
no,
in terms of conflict
no,
resolution
no.
because
This is
just okay. It seems to me it looks like you're saying, oh, this is disproportionate towards like some standard or some I guess some average of values, but that's not what I'm taking into consideration of a metric.
this is what I was referring to. I was referring to a pregnancy in which was consensual and produced the results that would be typical, and the atypical, which I hope is atypical, to be the potential of somebody who has been forced. The results would be completed. There would be a disproportionate result in the sort of attainment of the potential life.
Wait, just
Uh,
to be clear, disproportionate of what? Because I'm not sure if like you're
okay,
understanding
so somebody who's
value.
consensual, somebody who wants it, somebody who's in a good mental health state due to not being forced or going through a traumatic experience that resulted in this issue, statistically is likely to have less complications that wouldn't result in sort of immediate detriment to themselves whilst through the pregnancy and after the pregnancy.
But you just
Whereas
named
some,
one number, so just tell me the two concepts that we're evaluating when we're talking about the metric of proportionality.
we're not evaluating necessarily the metrics of abortionality. We're evaluating the metrics of we're evaluating specifically the metrics of somebody who's been forced to go through this event and
Okay,
somebody
so
who's
this is your
potentially
issue,
not.
and I know I'm cutting you off, but this is like the issue because I gave you a standard of proportionality and a theory of conflict resolution, and you're saying, no, we're actually not doing this. Like, I just gave you an argument, or I gave you like a reason, or some metric that I'm using, and I gave you the two concepts, the two variables that we're going to use to evaluate proportionality, and then your response to that is just saying, well, no, we're not going to evaluate these things, and so that's just not addressing my argument.
Restate the values, 'cause maybe I'm misinterpreting what you're saying, but I went on to a point specifically in regards to like what would be the outcost of those two circumstances, because your argument is effectively, from what I can understand, you're doing it on a cost by cost basis. You use the shoe and the guitar as an example, and I would say, well, we can extrapolate that out, and we can actually look at the consequence of the circumstances by and large through statistical evidence and what we actually see in the real world of these events taking place, of a perfectly healthy sort of engaged relationship that leads to a pregnancy and a forced pregnancy, the consequences of both the pregnancy and what happens after the pregnancy, and how there's a disproportionate negative sort of effect on one side compared to the other.
Okay, I think I see the confusion. So when I'm talking about conflict or conflict resolution, conflict is being defined as, and I don't know if there's like a controversial definition, but mutually exclusive interests. So you have a conflict of interest, you have contradictory interests that are mutually exclusive, and so the interests are going to have like people. They're necessarily there's going to be agents who like constitute the interests, and so there's going to be two people who have conflicting interests. And so when we're evaluating like the cost benefit analysis or like the utility calculus, we're just going to refer to those two people and their conflict of interests. And so that's the theory of proportionality. So, or at least proportional force in theories of conflict resolution, because it's inherently indexed towards conflict because this is conflict resolution.
Okay, that's. I think I understand where you're coming from a bit more now. I'm still lost in the sense that I'm not sure where you're trying to equate the proportionality between the byproduct of the event and the person who went through the event.
I guess I can give I guess an example. Yeah, what happened to the comments? But yeah, I guess an example would be, if somebody is like throwing like they're just like hitting me with a water gun, and and this is an example I didn't come up with it. By the way, so just to be clear, I didn't come up with this one, but it's basically where we have this old person who's like just sitting on their porch. They're so old and like they have some I don't know cardiovascular disease to the point where they can't really get up and walk, and somebody starts squirting them with a water bottle over and over. Some like kids are just like blasting with a water bottle like a lot to the point where like it won't stop. And so you could look at conflict resolutions and your means of conflict resolution according to gentlest means necessary. This would be one force or one theory of conflict resolution. You could say that you could take the gentlest means, and it just happens that you have a Glock next to you and you can just like shoot the kid with your arm or like with the little energy you have. So under gentlest means, that would be the gentlest means necessary. And so that would be a bad reduction. Obviously, that would be bad. But according to proportional force, you'd say, okay, this is disproportional because you have values. Your values are not to get blasted in the face with cold water on a summer day. You just don't want to get hit in the face with water. And the other kid's values, because this is a conflict of interest. You have contradicting interest. You don't want to get hit in the face. The kid wants to hit you in the face. Conflict of interest. So conflict resolution would say, okay, a proportional theory of conflict resolution would say, okay, the values that you're taking away from the child is actually disproportional to the values that you would have lost if you had like just not shoot him.
Okay. Uh, could you not use an example that actually relates to what we're talking about? Like
Can I not use an example that relates? So
if
you
well,
don't want
no,
me to
no,
use an example that relates.
no. I want you to use the example of in regards to the fetus and in regards to the mother in a circumstance in which is the result of SA.
Okay,
If it relates, it should be able to be logically consistent within an argument if you're going to make it that way.
yeah, sure. I guess I can just like input the variables. So replace the old man with the woman, replace the child like shooting water with the child to depriving the woman of resources. I think 9 months of pregnancy, seeing I can understand that as a value. It's a pretty high value, but I also like value human life as like even higher value. Like I think it's like a much higher standard of value than just 9 months of pregnancy or labor.
Okay, but the argument wouldn't be that the argument in this circumstance wouldn't be the issue is that the child is taking the woman's resources. That's not the argument. The argument is of the side of the trauma and the physical repercussions of that event and the capacity and ability of an individual to cope with those events safely and to be able to allow themselves and the unborn in any sort of repute to move past this. So I would say that you're looking at it from the wrong. It's nothing to do with the resources at this point, because yeah, if we were on about somebody who just wants an abortion, we could make the argument of, oh, well, it's a resource conflict, and then we could say, well, we value the human life more. Great, but we're not necessarily spent on that point because the resources isn't the issue. The event that took place initially that resulted in this, that is causing the emotional turmoil and disproportionately affecting the individual, is what's at conflict here.
Wait, it seems like what you're doing is just you're looking at because like there's two members of like the set of values. And when we're talking about proportionality, we're going to evaluate okay which one is like going to be proportional in like the theory of conflict resolution. So it looks like you're just taking one member. You're taking one member of the set and you're just like increasing it by replacing like resources or not even replacing it, but you're just adding trauma to the resources. But I don't think trauma plus resources deprivation is going to be equivalent to like the loss of
I'm
human
not
life.
using not
So
using resource deprivation as a like a sort of factor in this. This isn't a factor in sort of the argument.
well, it is a
The
factor.
well, no, because the
Well
resource
this is where I'm
deprivation
actually
isn't a
going to
fact.
contend.
The resource is being taken by a fetus from the female isn't a factor in their mind when they're thinking of, oh, I've had this traumatic event happen to me which is now forcing me to have a
And
fetus
also,
and a
wait, you
child.
under Well, just to be clear, you understand that when you have like certain resources deprived from you in pregnancy, you also see that you understand that that in itself takes away from your mental states. That's why you have like postpartum depression because like you had certain resources deprived from you, and you had some like biological structure or
An
biological
appeal, an appeal to that is all well and great. However, it's still not what is in regards to the conversation and what is in contention here. The contention
Wait,
is
you
nothing
just
to
said
do
it's
with the
all great.
resource.
No, you just said it's all great, but I'm just like I've demonstrated to you how it is actually something to take into consideration when we're talking about conflict resolution.
It's a potential effector. So it could be linked
Yeah,
in.
you
It
can
could be linked
evaluate.
in later, but
Yeah, good
it's not
job. Good job.
actually it's not
Look,
actually
we
the
evaluated
conflict.
it. Good job.
So a
And you
great
can
great
add.
example. A great example.
Yeah, you can
Let's
add.
take the
No,
old
that's what I'm telling
person.
you. You can add it.
But and so now you're adding it. So now it's not the main sort of contention. But
I
this is
didn't
why
say it was added. I
I'm
didn't
gonna
say it was
I'm gonna
added.
I'm gonna
You tried to
link it.
replace it with trauma, and you said,
I'm
"Oh, but you're not."
I'm
When you
going
said
to
when you're
link
going
it.
through trauma,
It
you're not
back to
taking into
your example.
consideration the
I'm
deprivation of
going
resources.
I'm going to link it back to your example of the old person in the water. You're now adding that old
I
person.
didn't add. Look, what did I add?
You are
Just
now
tell me. Just
adding
tell me. Yeah, just
you're
tell me
adding
what
the
I added.
resources argument, which isn't part of the contention here. That's not the
No,
conflict.
wait,
The
you
con
understand that the resources are going to add towards the proportionality. Like you understand that it's gonna like add towards like the
Wonderful.
need to get an
You're saying you're
abortion,
not
right?
adding it, but you're adding it with like
No,
that
it's
statement there
presupposed. No, no, no,
because
no,
we're
no, no.
talking
I'm not
about the
adding it
original
because that was
conflict.
presupposed. No, that was presupposed in the original calculation. That was in the utility calculation. We are already taking it into consideration, and then you decided to add. You decided to actually not add it, but replace it with trauma. And I was like, no, you shouldn't replace it with trauma. You should add it with the trauma because those things are still going to be true in the cases of pregnancy. I don't know why you're disregarding this like obviously effective thing that the mother's going through
The
just
detriment to the
because they're
mental
going through
state,
some trauma.
due to resources consumption of the fetus isn't always a negative. So some people actually get
I didn't
the
say it was
opposite
always
of
negative.
postpartum depression. So consequently, it's not the conflict.
I didn't
We're
say it
not
was.
talking
I
about the
didn't say it was
conflict here.
always the conflict.
You're adding a potentiality of something due to an
Yeah.
action, and then
Wait. Oh, okay.
making that your main
You're actually
point because
not
that's
tracking
what
because
we
you
brought
understand that
up as the
trauma is a
conflict.
potentiality too. You
Well,
understand that trauma is a potentiality. So just because something is a potential and not a necessary doesn't mean we can't evaluate it in
actually,
our theories of conflict
actually,
resolution.
actually, in regards to the trauma of the event, if we're talking about
You think the trauma is a
forced
necessity?
sex, I think you'd be hard pressed to find an individual who doesn't already have maybe a potential condition which would be in extringently affecting their
Hard
ability to
pressed isn't a
comprehend it.
necessity condition. You're getting lost now.
I'm not getting lost at all. I'm trying to get it
Oh,
right
so
back
do
to
you
where the
think
actual
so? Okay,
conflict
so do you
is,
think
because
it's potential or necessary?
the actual conflict at
Do you think it's
hand,
potential or necessary?
I think it's necessary
You think
in
it's necessary?
as so far as what we have
Okay,
seen
do you have a deductive
with every,
argument for that? Do you have a deductive argument for that? Because
we haven't
you
seen.
can make necessity claims. You can make necessity claims with deductive arguments, but you can't use inductive reasoning to make necessity claims. That'd be
Like
category error.
I can put it quite simply. Um, Statistically, there is no evidence
Also, so you are using the inductive reasoning.
within the confines of what we
So
have. There's no
you
evidence
are doing the category error.
we are doing.
The category error.
There isn't any evidence. I get you want to abstune from the actual point, but it is getting frustrating.
I
Stop
get you
making it
want to
about
run from
resources.
places
Stick
where you
to
get
the
caught
actual
in the
conflict.
contradiction. I get
Well,
it.
no, because you're not trying to stick to the conflict. You actually are abstaining from the conflict and making it
No,
about
I'm
something
trying to
completely
steel
different.
man your argument because you tried to take the deprivation of physical resources out of the utility calculus, and I said no, you would just add trauma to it. You wouldn't replace it.
No.
No,
I
no,
didn't
you
say
tried to
that.
do
I
this
said
with
it
rhetorical
wasn't the
thing.
conflict. I
No,
said
no,
it
no,
wasn't the conflict.
no, you tried to do this
No, I said it
rhetorical thing.
wasn't the conflict.
I'm
I said
actually
it wasn't the
stealing. I'm
conflict the
actually
entire
stealing.
time.
No, it's okay, little bro. I'm steel manning
Sorry,
you right
I
now,
said
little
it
bro.
wasn't the conflict
Little
the
bro, you're getting
entire
steamed
time.
right now.
So why don't we stick to the conflict and what's your
And
argument
your
against
and
that
your issue
conflict?
was that oh,
Because
but that's a potential. You're like oh, but that's a
which is still
potential. Therefore, we
avoiding
can't take it into consideration
Lucario.
of our utility calculus. No, our utility
I'm
calculus
going
isn't
to use
applicable
your
towards
argument you used
potentials.
earlier against you. Stop running from the point.
I'm ready for
What
the
is your
okay.
conflict
Hey, little bro, I just want to ask you.
what
Hey,
is your solution to the
little bro, I
conflict
just want
of
to
the
ask
actual
you.
circumstances,
No, you made
not to
no. You made a
utility?
claim. You made a claim that the trauma was a necessary condition. It was a necessary entailment from the essay. Can you demonstrate
It
that
is.
without inductive reasoning? Without inductive reasoning, because that's the only way you can get a necessity claim. Which is without inductive reasoning. You can only use deductive reasoning.
Oh,
Go.
okay. Just want to point out that when this isn't an argument of reasoning, this is an argument of actual observable
No,
fact.
this isn't an argument of reasoning, and by argument I just mean premises that follow a conclusion using reasoning, but we're also not using reasoning at the same time.
The reality
That was so
behind
dumb
it
to say.
is it's a fact that trauma occurs from SA. The variance of
Oh,
the
it says
trauma can be
from, as in we're
disputed.
using an inference? As in we're using an inference?
No, no, from what's observable.
Oh, from what's observable, we come to a conclusion using this neat little thing in philosophy called an inference?
No, I'm not using philosophy. I'm using the real world. I'm using actual examples of what
Oh, because
actually
the real world
happens
is
in the real
mutually
world.
exclusive with
Philosophy
philosophy.
is
That's what I
philosophy
understand.
is all well and great, but we don't need philosophy to
No, I'm talking
explain,
about reason.
and we
No, no,
don't
no.
have
I'll just replace the word
philosophical
philosophy with fucking
explanations.
logic.
We
No,
don't
no,
have
no. Just
philosophical
replace it with fucking
explanations as
logic.
to why
We're not
tangerines are
using reasoning.
orange, do
We
we?
observe things and make inductive
Lucario,
claims. We're not using
just
reasoning.
take a
By
hiatus for a
definition,
second,
we are
because
using
we
reasoning.
don't
But
need
I'm just gonna say we're
philosophy.
not using reasoning.
Lucario,
So go on.
we don't need philosophy to evaluate why a tangerine is orange, do we? Because it's
Wait, just to be
observable
clear, just to
within
be
the
clear.
reality of the world.
Wait. Just to be clear, I want to ask a clarifying question. Debater, you think you don't look dumb as shit right now, right?
I don't. Because
Okay, that's great.
you're trying to make a philosophical argument for something that's actually observable within the
Okay,
world.
so just to be clear, in this like little rhetorical rant you tried to do, you said that we're not using reasoning when we observe things and we make a conclusion from those things, but we're also
I'm
not
using
using reasoning, right?
philosophical reasoning.
No, I didn't say anything about philosophical reasoning, dumbass. I said
I
reasoning.
did. So maybe that's a issue
No,
with maybe my
I
stutter
said we're
you're
using
not
reasoning.
hearing.
No, I said reasoning. You're so
And
dumb.
I said philosophical reasoning.
And I
So
said reasoning.
maybe
I
this is
couldn't give a shit
maybe
what you
this is
said
the
because I just made the
contention.
claim. Look, I just
Maybe
made the
this is
claim. Okay,
wonderful.
okay, no,
Wonderful.
that's
But
fine.
Lucario, I'm not going to allow
What is
you to get
philosophical
Lucario.
reasoning?
I'm not going to
What is
allow you to run
philosophical
away.
reasoning?
I'm not going to allow you to
Just
run away
tell
and
me what
abstain from
philosophical
the
reasoning is.
actual point.
It's okay,
So
little bro. Study up.
start
Okay,
addressing the
man.
actual point
Study
and
up.
stop running
I'll
away,
study up
please.
if I argue.
No, no, start addressing the actual point because I get you don't want to seem like a jackass because you don't want to address
No, I
SA and
definitely
actually
won't
what
seem
it
like a jackass.
entails. But
If you
you
think
need
I'm
to
trying
address
not to sound
that.
like a jackass right now, you're so dumb.
You need to address the contention of SA.
Bro. Okay, so I just want to rehash the conversation right now. So you
No, you're
tried to
gonna
do
answer
this
the
little retro.
question.
Oh, sorry. No, sorry. Go ahead.
You're gonna answer the question. Stop avoiding.
Oh, is he done?
I'm
Yeah. So
completely done. I'm seeing how disingenuous you're being here, and you are being disingenuous because whenever I try and bring it back to the actual
oh, he's not
contention of
done.
the issue, you run
You also let me
away
know when he's
and
done.
you try and skewer. But let's talk in directs now. Let's be honest. We're not talking about the resources. That's not the contention of the issue. Nobody's going to take a contention of the issue in relation to SA as, oh, it's because the baby's taking resources. No, it's because of the actual event that took place and the trauma. So stop running from that and address why that, in your worldview, what would be proportional, which is the question I asked 23 minutes ago to you, which you have now spent 23 minutes running around with. Are you going to address what actually is proportional to that in your metric and what you could define as proportional response to that in your metric?
Okay, so I let this guy rock out. Is he gonna let me do the same? Okay, yeah, we'll just see. So, just to rehash the conversation, I said we're going to use a utility calculus to evaluate the proportionality of conflict resolution. And when he said, oh, you wouldn't use like the deprivation of physical resources, you'd instead replace it with the deprivation of psychological resources, I said, no, that's not going to be true. You can add the deprivation with each other. I'm trying to help your argument. I'm trying to show how it would be actually closer to being proportional to abortion. This would be bad for my view. This would be bad for my argument and good for your argument. But you said no because you didn't want to look like you got corrected in the debate. You wanted to hold on to this rhetorical like little standpole that you have right here. So you wanted to hold on to that rhetoric and say no. You didn't want to accept my advice. You said no. You're not going to add them. You're just going to replace the physical deprivation with the psychological deprivation. And I said no. This isn't going to be true. You can add it together. And your contention with the physical deprivation being involved in the utility calculus is that oh, it's just potential. Therefore, we can't consider it in our utility calculus. But that trait is also true of the psychological deprivation, and you can't demonstrate how it's not a potential. You have to say that it's necessary, and you can't demonstrate how it's necessary without a deductive argument. And you don't have a deductive argument. Any argument that you try to make is just going to be observation, which is categorically an inductive argument. You can't make a necessity claim with just inductive arguments. This is a misunderstanding of all forms of logic. You should study up, little bro.
Okay, now that you've majorly misrepresented what was being said, because when it came to utility arguments, Yeah, I concede that it would be added in. But when we're talking about the conflict necessarily, and not to confuse people in here, and not to derange from it, we're talking about what actually has occurred. And we're not talking about things that are in the ether and not of a potential here. We're talking about an actual action of occurrence which has an effect. So it's all well and good to argue, well, we're talking about the resources, but the reason I did and the reason I stand by the main focus being on what's occurring within the circumstance, what the contention of the circumstance is, and where the focus should be, is because when we're talking about SA, we are talking about the main issue here, which is that the person has been forced without their ability to sort of consent, and in most instances that we can observe violently, to be through this circumstance and to go through this issue. Now, we can look at the resources being taken from the mother and say, yes, this could heighten the circumstances, but that's not the contention. The reason you got the response I did with you is because you tried to make that the sum total of the contention. Because when you brought up in your own argument that you said that the conflict here would be that the resources, you brought that up. So you brought up the resources being the contention here. You made that the primary. That's where I argued against you in. Because when you tried to make that the primary, you were doing this also after I'd asked you 27 minutes ago what your actual contention is and how you would justify through your model proportionality. What justification is there for the proportional response that somebody who has been essayed should have? But you're running from it so quickly, you'd think that you were Usain Bolt. So how about you stick to what you think should be a reasonable or should be proportional to somebody who has been essayed and what actions they should take in regards to your own worldview and in regards to your own philosophy of this. Because you ran from it for so long, I'm starting to get a migraine.
Damn, I got a concession with a side of straw man. I didn't realize I paid for the value meal. That's
I
crazy.
mean, you did that to me and I
So
didn't
oh
straw
sorry,
man.
sorry, no, no, sorry. I didn't realize you were done. Go ahead. It's still going. Go ahead.
Well, you just lied. I didn't straw man your position. That's exactly what you said. And actually, you tried doing that to me the entire time. So it's a bit like the pot calling the kettle black there. So if you're going to make an argument for straw man, don't be doing it yourself in the same breadth of 5 minutes.
You done? Yeah, he's done. Anyway, so the straw man is just going to be that you said that I asserted that I was that the physical resources, that the preparation of physical resources is going to be the primary thing or the primary variable when we're talking about utility calculus. That's not what I said. I said it was the assumed. I specifically used the word assumed because I knew it was going to be an assumption, and that's what we can add other variables on top of, which is my argument this whole time that you're going to add the psychological deprivation of resources on top of it. I'm not saying I'm not even talking about like primaries because the primary could just be, oh, which one is like greater. I don't really care. I didn't make great claims. I didn't use add a utility calculus within the variables of our already established utility scale. That's not what I did. So you got confused again.
Are you going to answer the question or are you going to run away? Because you're still
What's the
doing
question? I missed the question in that like 20-minute rant. Go ahead.
that. It wasn't a 20-minute rant. It barely spanned 2 minutes. So, okay, wonderful. How about you just address exactly what I'm saying? What do you think in your conflict resolution framework would be proportional to an essay circumstance and what that person should do in regards to the potentiality of being pregnant?
Something that has similar properties, such as like a physical deprivation, and something that would also cause like some sort of psychological deprivation. I'm not sure such a thing like is even very common in the real world. I think SA is a very unique situation, and to try to compare it, just like by a one-on-one situation, I think that would be like, I think it would be pretty difficult and also diminishing to do. I think you can like evaluate other things such as life, which I think the value of human life is going to be higher than like psychological and physical deprivations when we're talking about utility calculus. And I can give reasons for that as well if you want, but I don't think you're going to get that far. Do you want to
Which
go there?
life?
Which life?
Which life do you value more would be a question.
Which oh, is the life being categorized here?
I would
Is life
say
being
that I
contended
would
here?
say that you could do that in this circumstance quite easily.
Hey, debater, do you remember when I said that I had a medical exception?
Wonderful. I'm not making a medical argument in that necessary regard. I'm
No,
saying which side would
I
you
was just
value?
asking, I was just asking if your brain has the ability to make pretty basic inferences. So, in the medical
Okay.
exception,
So
according to the utility calculus that we're using in proportional force as a theory of conflict resolution, you can input the mother's life being in danger and also the fetus's life being in danger. And seeing as I have an exception for the mother's life, it's crazy how it's almost like I'm saying that I value the mother's life more because she has a right to I don't know, take proportional means of conflict resolution. It's almost like it meets my sufficient conditions for taking evaluative measures and getting the abortion. It's almost like it's what I've been arguing this whole time. Crazy.
it's really not what you've been arguing this entire time. But if you want to try and spin it in that sort of way, absolutely.
Okay,
Um,
go ahead and repeat my argument and tell me how it's mutually exclusive to what I just told you.
Go ahead and repeat your argument and tell you how it's mutually exclusive. Why do I have
Yes,
to do?
because I added a very, I told you new
Why do
things about
I?
my argument.
Yeah, yeah.
Go ahead.
Why do I have to repeat your argument when you're just going to say if I get one thing wrong, it's a straw man? How about we
That's
just
no,
answer
no, no,
both
no,
those
no, no. It's not.
questions? Because
No, I'm not
I
gonna call it
get
a
you
straw
like
man. I'm
being
just gonna call
obtuse,
it you.
but
I'm just gonna call it you
as
failing the
wonderful as
pop
this is,
quiz. You
as
failed the.
wonderful as
You're gonna
as
fail the pop quiz.
wonderful
It's
as this
pop
is,
quiz time. Hey, buddy, it's pop quiz time. Pop
Nicole
quiz
wanted to
time.
say that I'm not Nicole.
Hey,
Sorry.
you want to study up? Study up, man.
I don't
Pop
need to
quiz
study
time.
up. You're
Repeat
very
to me
childish,
what I've
aren't
been
you?
arguing this whole time, and tell
NY
me how it
said
is
that it
mutually
doesn't. They don't
exclusive
think that
for
I've
what
addressed
I've been
anything
saying.
you said, but you
Because when you
haven't
say that
addressed
I
any
twisted my
contention that
argument,
I've made
trying to do
in the
this
past
rhetorical thing,
25.
you got
No,
dunked
no,
on.
30 odd minutes.
Intellectually got dunked on. You rhetorically got dunked on. You tried
No,
to
if
gibber
that
to
makes
save
you
yourself.
feel better, that's wonderful. But I am probably going to end it here because you clearly don't want to do anything
Because you
other
got your
than sort
ass
of run
whooped. It's
away
okay.
from the
I would
topic.
run away too if I got my ass whooped so
No, I
badly.
didn't get my ass whooped. This is the thing that
Yo,
you're
wait,
not
debater, how
understanding,
old are
and
you?
this is sort of your
Debater, how old are
ultimate.
you?
This is sort of your ultimate defense
Wait,
for
debater, I just want to know how old are
anything,
you?
for
Debater, how old are you?
anything, for
How old are you?
anything that sort
How
of
old are
doesn't
you?
align with how you want to view
Debater,
yourself.
how old are
You
you?
will always win in your mind because
Debater, how
nobody
old are
can
you?
be right in your mind.
Debater, how old are you, man?
I'm old enough to know that you're a bad faith debater and you're kind of moronic.
Okay, so what, like, you're like 21?
Now, why is my age relevant to anything that's being
I
discussed?
didn't say it was relevant,
So
dumbass.
why are you asking?
What do you think I'm asking? Because I want to know.
Why do you want to know?
Because I'm asking, I want to know.
No, I don't have to give you that information just because you have
I
no
never
business.
made a necessity claim that you had to give me the explanation.
Never
That's all
said
I'm
you
saying.
did. I'm just telling you. I'm not giving you information because
Okay,
you
good.
aren't requiring me to give
Hey,
it.
the
And
sky's not purple right now.
I'm not what?
The sky's not purple right now. It's an irrelevant fact that nobody claimed or contended, but I'm gonna say it
No, but
anyway.
you're going to try and make a point about it. That's why you're
I
asking.
didn't.
Actually, you
Wait,
don't know what
how do you
is
put
or
the
isn't
credence for that?
purple.
I was just
Yeah,
You
because
asking
don't
I've
know
seen
how
you
how
debate
old is
before,
this guy?
Lucario, and you always go
I
to
was
ad
just asking
hominems
how old
whenever
is
you
this guy?
lose.
He doesn't want to. He doesn't want to give his age.
Yeah, because it's none of your business.
Oh yeah, it's none of my business.
And it has no bearance or relevance on the topic because you sound 13 with the way you debate, but like,
No, I'm
I've not
actually
asked your
12, man.
age. Well, that would explain a lot about your
I'm
maturity.
12 inches in your mom, bitch. Get wrecked.
Wow.
Roast unlocked.
No, just kind of
Anyway,
amused
I'm done
by
with
how
this dog.
pathetic
Yo,
you are.
Scooby, I think it's over. I'm done with this dog.
Are you
Yeah,
guys able to bring it back to ground level, or I mean, like,
Unless he
I'm
wants to
not
keep
gonna lie,
going.
I really won't
debater.
be able to sort
I'm
of
not
have the
gonna lie,
mental fortitude to
buddy,
debate with somebody
buddy.
so fucking
Lucario's in your
moronic.
head, debater.
So
Lucario's in your head.
he's
Stop
about as
letting
much
him get in your head.
in my
Stop
head as
letting
I
him get in
actually
your
give a
head,
shit
buddy.
about.
Stop letting him get in your head.
He's
Debate.
not in my head.
He- You know what, chat? I know I didn't put this in the polls, but chat, do you believe that Lucario's in Debater's head, or do you believe that Debater's in Lucario's head?
Neither, because I don't give a shit enough about their existence.
You identify as chat now? Oh, okay.
No, it's just you've made no useful point. You didn't argue in good faith, and you'd never actually kept to what you were being asked. So you're kind of useless in regards to debates. Like
Oh, which question didn't I?
if
Well,
you were in an
wait.
actual
Which
debate
question
with
didn't
an
I
actual
ask?
moderator
Okay,
of any
I'll just
sort of
answer it right now.
reputable,
No,
if you
I'll
were in
do
an
it right
actual
now.
debate with any moderator with any
Yeah, that's fine.
cognitive retribute, you'd have been thrown on
You
your
didn't
ass a long
answer
time ago.
any of my questions. Oh, buddy, which one of your questions did I not answer? I'll answer it right now. I'm just going to keep gibberating because I know I'm gonna get my ass whooped some more.
No, I made it simple. What is the specific conditions that you would apply as a reasonable response within your conflict to an individual who's been essayed, and what they should do in regards to that isn't included with abortion? Because
I
the
think they
reason that
should
made me
refrain from
give.
disproportional means of conflict resolution.
So give an example
Do
of
you
how
have
that
any
would
other?
apply
Do you
to
have
the
any other
circumstance.
dumbass questions?
So
Do you
give
have
an
any other
example.
dumbass
It's not a
questions?
dumbass question because you're still not answering it. You're being obtuse. I said specific. You're giving a non-specific
Specific.
answer.
Take a hike. Yeah, take a hike. That's what they should do. Read a book. Study some
I mean, you,
philosophy.
you can
That's what
screen
you should
record
do.
NY. What have you screen recorded? Because I've also been screen recording because I will probably watch this back later and heave at the bad faith actor here.
Yeah, I'm like super bad faith because like I answer disjunctions and I also like call out categorical norms.
No, because you used ad
Category
homonyms. You
errors.
tried to
I just call
obscure.
out I
You
just
tried
call
to
out
you tried
category
to obscure
errors.
from
I
the
call out
topic.
like really bad
You tried
category
to
errors.
deviate from the topic. You
And
actually
when
jibber
somebody
jabbered more
says,
than you cared to admit.
"Oh, what
So
was that?"
you obscured from the topic. You jibber jabbered, and you didn't actually stick on to what
What
you
did
were
I
being
say? Yeah,
correct
look,
for.
if I'm explaining like if I'm explaining pre-calculus to like a second grader, it's gonna sound like I'm jibber jabbering. Yeah, I grant that.
Now you're trying to do another ad hominem, which is eludely evading to my
What do you think an
intelligence.
ad hominem is, dumbass? You could use an ad hominem fallacy. I could say, "Oh, this is bad because your argument fails because you're a dumbass." That would be an ad hominem, sure. I'm just straight up insulting you now.
Yes, and what is a conduit of an ad hominem? An insult in regards to the debate.
In regards to the debate, or do I
Yeah.
think I'm just not talking about the debate? I'm just like personally talking to you.
Well, if you want to say that, by all means, then you're just an
Yeah, I
idiot.
am.
You
Because
have to resort to
the debate is
insults
like
to try and
actually it's
justify
actually over
your.
now. Like you understand, you got wrecked so bad. There's no debate to talk about. It
I
was
didn't
just
get
you getting
wrecked. I
clapped
didn't
for. It
get
was you
wrecked at
getting clapped
all.
for
You're
40
just bad
minutes.
faith. Arguing from bad
Yeah,
faith
so
doesn't grant you any
debating. You know how
superiority.
I said like he's in your head. He's in your head. He's dictating the discussion, and it's not even on the debate. Get back to the debate, guy. Bring it back to the debate.
Look, debater, do you wanna keep debating?
I'm actually going to head off, but I'm going to send in the screen recording. I'm just going to need them to message me. Have a lovely day. Well, I don't actually because I don't really care.
My
I'm going to go and
feelings.
actually have a more interesting debate, which I'm going to have in half an hour, which will be fun.
Yeah,
I
so
It'll
love
this
you,
is
actually be
why
on.
debater.
you need to
It'll
Suaz
actually be with good faith
1717.
actors on theology.
I
So
hope you have a good day.
I'll
I
have a
hope you have a
wonderful
great day,
day.
actually.
That was fucking sad.
Bro.
He wasn't even asking you like what would be enough for like an obligation or what would grind. He never even like really engaged whatsoever.
Yeah, no, he didn't. He just kept on like repeating the question, which I already answered, and then the question is just like a really big category error. I explained to him, look, look, little bro, you're using big words that you don't understand. So I'm gonna explain to
Wow.
you. Yeah,
And personally, I wouldn't let you talk to me like that, but damn, bro.
yeah. Me personally, I would have joined back the live stream if I left right now. I would have joined back after I heard that.
Yeah, dude, I would have been like, damn, bro.
Let's close off.